From Pennsylvania, Mr. Rothfus, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. I'd like to touch a little bit on the coal-fired power generation guidelines that have been recently come out, following up on Congressman Barr and Congressman Capito. Did the administration consult with other countries and develop these new policies as a result of multilateral negotiations at the boards of these institutions?
We've had discussions. I'd have to check whether they were discussions that would rise to a level of negotiations. I would be
interested in hearing if they were, so if you could please follow up with us in writing to see who was involved with those. My concern is that this is essentially a unilateral political decision that was made at the White House without consulting our friends and allies.
We have had conversations with our friends and allies about it, so it is obviously our view, but it's not something that we've just done without talking to our friends and allies.
Can you tell us whether the countries that will be made ineligible for development bank funding for coal-fired power plants agree with this new U.S. policy?
Well, I think you can see from the facilities proposals that are moving through that there are plans that continue to be presented for funding.
We hear a lot about China making a lot of investing in Africa. Won't countries just start buying Chinese coal-fired power plants that are less durable and that do not have the same rigorous standards that we have in the United States?
Well, look, I think that relates to a separate question, which is that China is increasingly looking for ways to increase its participation in multilateral and international financial.
Is China adopting the same regulations or the same guidelines that you've put through?
I don't believe so.
Is it fair? Is it fair? Is it fair, Mr. Secretary, to deny underdeveloped countries the opportunity to grow their economy with low-cost energy? The way the United States has?
We're trying to help underdeveloped countries gain access to bountiful and, in many cases, renewable energy supply.
And how many people have been lifted out of poverty because of solar power?
Hydro is a big factor in many underdeveloped countries, and I think solar and renewable have potential. And I would say this about China: that China is confronting climate change in a very real way because they're dealing with the public health problem in their own country, which they
Has China suspended the construction of coal-fired power plants?
They haven't suspended, but they are very much focused on how they can reduce carbon emissions.
I'd like to switch a little bit. In a recent article that appeared in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, it was reported that the number of banking institutions in the United States has fallen to its lowest level since the Great Depression, down from a peak of more than 18,000 institutions to below 7,000. This significant decline has come almost entirely in the form of exits by banks with less than $100 million in assets. In other words, our community banks. Rising regulatory costs is citing as a major reason why these numbers are declining. Over the past year, this committee has heard from a number of witnesses about these rising regulatory costs and how it acutely burdens small financial institutions, both community banks and credit unions. Mr. Secretary, are you concerned about these bank closures and consolidation within the financial services industry?
Congressman, I think community banks play a very important role in our economy. I've met with community bank representatives on quite a number of occasions. I've met with regulators, and I've shared my concerns with them. I think that if you look at the actions taken by regulators, it shows a great deal of attention to trying to carve out rules that treat community banks appropriately, even the Volcker rule that was finalized this week. So I think we are concerned with the health of community banks and are trying to balance the responsibilities we have to ensure safety and soundness in the financial system with a good opportunity for community banks to be healthy.
In a recent speech that you delivered at the Pew Charitable Trusts, you heralded the work of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, particularly its implementation of the new qualified mortgage standards, which will go into effect in a couple weeks. You also criticized the work of this committee to institute much-needed reforms at the CFPB to make the Bureau more transparent and accountable to the American people. Just a few weeks ago, before you delivered that speech, Chairman Capito and I held a roundtable back in Pittsburgh, where we heard firsthand from banks, credit unions, housing advocates, community development organizations about how the QM rule as currently written will cause significant harm to the economy and housing market and will make it more difficult for working families in western Pennsylvania and around the nation to buy homes. As the chairman of FSOC, you have some oversight authority over CFPB rulemaking, including QM. So I'd like to hear your response to these concerns.
Congressman, I think that as Director Cordray has indicated, they are working through the final details and believe that many of those concerns can be addressed, and when the institutions understand better,
Well, those
they will be
concerns
addressed.
remain. I would encourage you to listen to the advocates for the low to moderate income borrowers.
Happy to.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms.